They called her the Death Speaker, and they were not wrong. Neve had seen her first vision at 7 years old, her grandmother's face, pale and still, surrounded by white flowers. 3 days later, the old woman died in her sleep. After that, the visions never stopped. She saw deaths before they happened, sometimes days in advance, sometimes only hours. She saw accidents and illnesses, murders and natural passings. The images came without warning, slamming into her mind like fists, leaving her gasping and shaking while the person whose fate she'd witnessed stared at her in horror. No one wanted to be near the girl who might see their death. By the time she was 19, Neve had learned to make herself invisible. She spoke softly when she spoke at all. She kept her eyes downcast, her movements small, her presence as unobtrusive as possible. The less attention she drew, the fewer people demanded to know if she'd seen their future. The fewer people blamed her when someone died. Her pack tolerated her existence only because her gift was occasionally useful. When the Alpha wanted to know if a raid would succeed, he summoned her. When a pregnant woman feared for her child, Neve was dragged from her hut to touch the swollen belly and report what she saw. But no one thanked her. No one looked at her with anything but fear. She was a tool, a curse wrapped in human skin. And today, she had been given away like unwanted furniture. The Lycan king had demanded tribute from all the packs in his territory: gold, grain, soldiers. Her Alpha had sent her instead, along with a note that read, "A seer who speaks with death. Perhaps you can find use for her." Now Neve stood in the great hall of the king's castle, surrounded by strangers, her head bowed and her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The journey had taken 5 days. No one had spoken to her the entire time. She was used to it. "This is the tribute from the Eastern Pack." A voice rang out, sharp with disdain. "A half-starved girl? Alpha Rendell insults us." "She's a seer, my lord." One of the escorts spoke up, though he kept his distance from Neve as he did. "She sees death. The Alpha thought His Majesty might find her useful." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Neve felt the weight of dozens of stares, felt the fear radiating from the courtiers like heat from a fire. Even here, hundreds of miles from home, her reputation preceded her. Death Speaker. Curse. Monster. She kept her eyes on the floor and waited for the rejection. The king would send her away, or lock her in a dungeon, or perhaps simply kill her and be done with the inconvenience. Any of those options seemed preferable to more years of this half-life. "Leave us." The voice was deep, commanding, and utterly calm. Neve heard the shuffle of feet as the courtiers obeyed, the heavy doors closing with a resonant boom. Then silence. She didn't look up, didn't move. The king was still in the room. She could feel his presence like a physical weight, but she had learned long ago that looking at powerful people invited their cruelty. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. They stopped directly in front of her. "Will you not look at me?" The question was quiet, curious rather than demanding. Neve's heart stuttered. "I've found that people prefer when I don't, Your Majesty," she said. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, hoarse from disuse. "They say my eyes make them uneasy." "Do they?" A pause. "I would like to see them anyway, if you're willing." Willing, as if she had a choice, as if her willingness mattered. But something in his tone made her raise her head. The Lycan king was not what she expected. He was younger than the stories suggested, with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples and eyes the color of deep forest, green, so dark it was almost black. His face was handsome in a sharp, angular way, but it was the expression on that face that caught her off guard. He was looking at her with interest, not fear, not disgust, genuine curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he wanted to solve. "There," he said softly. "That wasn't so terrible, was it?" Neve didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked to see her eyes. No one had ever looked at her like this, like she was a person rather than a threat. "What's your name?" he asked. "Neve, Your Majesty." "Neve." He said it carefully, as if tasting the sound. "I am Lysander. I dislike titles when we're alone." He paused. "They tell me you see death." "Yes." She braced herself for the inevitable question. "Have you seen mine?" And the fear that would follow when she admitted she hadn't. People always assumed that meant she was hiding something. But the question didn't come. "That must be exhausting," Lysander said instead. Neve blinked. "What?" "Seeing death, constantly carrying the weight of other people's fates." He tilted his head slightly. "Do you ever get to rest? Or are you always waiting for the next vision?" No one had ever asked her that. No one had ever considered that her gift might be a burden rather than a weapon to be wielded. "I—" She stopped, her throat tight. "I don't know how to answer that." "That's answer enough." Something softened in his expression. "You're afraid of me." "Everyone is afraid of me, Your Majesty." "Lysander," he corrected gently. "And that's not what I asked. I asked if you're afraid of me." Neve considered the question. She had been afraid for so long that fear had become her default state, as constant as breathing. But standing here, looking into this strange king's forest dark eyes, she realized that what she felt wasn't quite fear. It was confusion. "I don't understand you," she admitted. "You should be sending me away, or asking me to read your death, or—" She gestured helplessly. "Something. People don't just talk to me. They use me or they avoid me." "Then the people you've known are fools." He said it simply, without heat. "A gift like yours, it's not something to be used and discarded. It's something to be understood, respected." He paused. "Have you eaten today?" The shift in topic caught her off guard. No. The escorts didn't." "Of course they didn't." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Come. I'll have food brought to you." "Your Majesty," Lysander. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He extended his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a command. "I want to. Will you let me?" Neve stared at his hand. Clean, strong, steady. Nothing like the hands that usually reached for her, grabbing, pulling, forcing her to touch things she didn't want to touch, see things she didn't want to see. He was waiting, patient, not pushing. "Why?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. "Why are you being kind to me? You don't know me. I could be as cursed as they say. I could bring death to your doorstep just by existing." "Do you believe that?" he asked quietly. "I don't know what I believe anymore." "Then let me tell you what I believe." He didn't lower his hand. "I believe that you have spent your entire life being punished for something you didn't choose. I believe that the people who should have protected you instead exploited you. And I believe that you deserve better than fear and isolation." Her eyes burned. She looked away, blinking rapidly. "I don't see death as a curse, Neve," he continued. "I see it as power. And I see you, not as a monster, not as a tool, but as a woman who has been treated abominably and deserves the chance to discover who she might be without the weight of other people's terror pressing her down. "You don't know me," she repeated, her voice cracking. "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to, if you'll let me." She looked at his hand again, thought of all the years she'd spent being feared, avoided, blamed, thought of the long journey here, alone in a wagon, convinced she was being sent to her death, and thought of this king, this stranger, who had looked at her with curiosity instead of horror and asked if she was tired. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, and something in her chest cracked open. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You haven't tasted the castle food. It may be the real curse." Despite everything, Neve felt her lips twitch, almost a smile. She couldn't remember the last time she'd almost smiled. "Come," Lysander said, and led her out of the great hall. She didn't know what waited for her in this strange castle with this strange king. Didn't know if his kindness was real or just another trap. But as she walked beside him, her hand still clasped in his, Neve realized something had shifted. For the first time in 12 years, someone had leaned in to listen instead of pulling away. And that, more than any vision, felt like the beginning of something new. The chambers Lysander gave her were nothing like the drafty hut she had occupied back home. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth, warming air that smelled of cedar and clean linen. The bed was draped in deep blue velvet, piled high with pillows. Windows overlooked a garden where winter roses bloomed despite the cold, their petals white as snow. Neve stood in the center of the room, afraid to touch anything. "These can't be for me," she said. "They are." Lysander leaned against the doorframe, watching her with that unreadable expression. "The servants will bring you whatever you need. Clothes, books, anything. You have only to ask." "I don't understand." She turned to face him. "I'm tribute. I'm supposed to be, I don't know, a servant, a prisoner, something." "Is that what you want to be?" "It doesn't matter what I want. It does to me." He pushed off the doorframe and stepped into the room, though he kept his distance. "Neve, I'm not going to pretend I don't find your gift useful. A seer who can glimpse death is a powerful asset. But I didn't accept you from your alpha because I wanted a tool." "Then why?" "Because when I read his letter, this dismissive, cruel little note about a girl who speaks with death, I thought about what it must have been like for you, growing up with that ability, being blamed for things you couldn't control." His jaw tightened. "I thought about how alone you must have been, and I decided that whatever else happened, I would offer you something better than what you'd known." Neve's chest ached. She wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture she'd learned in childhood. "People don't do things like that," she said quietly. "Not for me. Not without wanting something in return. I know that's been your experience. I'm asking you to consider that your experience might not be universal." She didn't have an answer for that, didn't know how to process kindness without conditions, generosity without ulterior motive. A knock at the door made her flinch. Lysander held up a hand, wait, and opened it himself. A servant entered with a tray laden with food: soup, bread, roasted meat, a slice of honey cake. The smells made Neve's stomach clench with hunger. "Thank you," Lysander told the servant. "That will be all." When they were alone again, he gestured toward the small table where the food had been placed. "Eat, please. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." She hadn't. Her pack had never wasted good food on the death speaker. She sat down and ate, too hungry to pretend otherwise. The soup was rich and savory. The bread was fresh. The honey cake was so sweet, it almost brought tears to her eyes. Lysander sat in a chair by the fire, giving her space, not watching her eat. The consideration was so foreign it made her throat tight. "May I ask you something?" he said, when she finally pushed the empty plates away. "You're the king. You can ask whatever you want." "That's not how I prefer to operate." A slight smile. "May I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "When did you first see a death?" The question hit her like a blow to the chest. She looked away, her hands clenching in her lap. "You don't have to answer," Lysander added quickly. "I'm sorry. That was too personal." "No, it's—" She took a breath. "I was 7. I saw my grandmother. She was lying in a bed of white flowers, and her face was—" She stopped, swallowed. She looked peaceful. That was the worst part. She looked like she was finally at rest. 3 days later, she died. "I'm sorry." Everyone said it was my fault, that I had called death to her. Neve's voice had gone flat, distant. That was when they started calling me the death speaker, the curse, the monster. You were 7 years old. Old enough to know what death looked like. Old enough to understand that everyone I loved was going to leave me, and I would have to watch it happen before it did. Silence stretched between them. When Neve finally looked up, she found Lysander watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Not pity, something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. "I lost my mother when I was 8, he said quietly. "I didn't see it coming. I don't have your gift. But I was there when it happened. A hunting accident. I watched her die in my father's arms. I'm sorry." It shaped everything I became. The fear, the need for control, the desperate desire to protect everyone I cared about. He held her gaze. "I imagine your gift has shaped you too, in ways you didn't choose and couldn't prevent." She nodded slowly. "I learned to make myself small, quiet. If I didn't draw attention, people didn't ask me to see their futures. They didn't blame me when someone died. And so you've spent 12 years disappearing. It was easier than being seen? Easier, perhaps, but not better." He leaned forward slightly. "Neve, you have a gift. A rare, powerful, terrifying gift. And the people around you are too small, too frightened to understand it. But that doesn't mean you have to keep shrinking." "I don't know how to be anything else." "Then stay. Let me show you." His voice was earnest, almost urgent. "Let me prove that there's more to your life than fear and isolation. Let me help you discover who you might be when you're not constantly preparing for the next rejection." "Why do you care so much?" The question burst out of her, edged with desperation. "You just met me. I'm nothing to you. I'm nothing to anyone." "You're wrong." He rose from his chair and crossed to kneel before her, bringing himself to her eye level. "You are not nothing, and I care because—" He stopped, something flickering in his dark green eyes. "Because my wolf recognized you the moment you walked into my hall." Neve's heart stuttered. "What?" "I don't know what it means yet. I don't know if you feel anything in return. But something in me knows you, Neve. Something deeper than logic or reason." He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just looked at her with those forest dark eyes. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I know that's too much. I'm just asking you to stay long enough to see if there might be something here worth exploring." And if there isn't, if I'm just, if I can't, then you'll leave with whatever resources you need to build a life somewhere safe. No obligations, no debt. His voice was steady. But I hope you'll stay. I hope you'll give me the chance to prove that not everyone will flinch when you speak. She stared at him. This strange king who had knelt before her like she was something precious, who had asked about her pain instead of her power, who looked at her like she mattered. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. We can figure it out together. She should say no, should protect herself, maintain her walls, prepare for the inevitable disappointment. Instead, she said, "Okay, I'll stay." The relief that washed across his features was almost painful to witness. He rose and stepped back, giving her space again. "Thank you," he said. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like to show you the gardens. They're quite beautiful in the early morning light." "I'd like that." He smiled, a real smile this time, one that transformed his severe features into something almost boyish. "Good night, Neve." "Good night, Lysander." He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "That's the first time you've used my name. Is that all right?" "It's more than all right." He held her gaze for a moment longer, something warm flickering in his eyes. "It's a beginning." He left, and Neve sat alone in the beautiful room, her mind spinning. A king had knelt before her, had asked for the chance to prove himself, had looked at her like she was worth something. She didn't trust it. Couldn't. Not yet. But as she crawled into the impossibly soft bed and pulled the blankets around herself, she realized that for the first time in 12 years, she wasn't dreading tomorrow. She was almost looking forward to it. The days blurred together in a haze of unexpected peace. Lysander kept his promise. He showed her the gardens, where frost-touched roses bloomed in impossible colours. He introduced her to the castle library, 3 floors of books she could barely believe existed. He walked with her along the parapets at sunset, pointing out landmarks across his kingdom, while the sky burned orange and gold. And every day, without fail, he listened. He asked about her visions, not what she saw, but how they felt. He asked about her childhood, her favourite foods, the dreams she'd had before the gift had consumed everything else. He asked questions no one had ever thought to ask, and he leaned in close when she answered, as if her soft voice was the most important sound in the world. 2 weeks into her stay, Neve realized she had smiled more in those 14 days than in the previous 14 years combined. It terrified her. The nightmare came on the 15th night. She was back in her old village, but something was wrong. The faces around her weren't the familiar ones she'd grown up fearing. They were the faces of Lysander's court, his servants, his guards, and they were all staring at her with the same expression she knew so well: disgust, horror, hatred. "Death Speaker!" they chanted. "Curse! Monster!" She turned to run and found Lysander standing behind her, but his forest-dark eyes had gone cold, empty of the warmth she had started to depend on. "Did you really think you could escape what you are?" he asked. "Did you think I could love something like you?" She woke with a scream trapped in her throat, her body drenched in sweat, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The room was dark, empty, safe. But she couldn't stop shaking. She stumbled out of bed, desperate for air, and found herself wandering the castle corridors without destination. The stones were cold beneath her bare feet. The torches cast dancing shadows on the walls. She walked until her legs ached, until the panic began to recede, until she found herself standing before a door she didn't recognize. It opened before she could knock. Lysander stood on the other side, dressed in a loose shirt and sleep-rumpled trousers, his dark hair disheveled. His eyes went wide when he saw her. "Neve? What's wrong?" She opened her mouth to say nothing, to apologize, to retreat. Instead, a sob escaped, harsh and broken, the sound of 12 years of pain finally cracking through her walls. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean to. I don't know why I came here. I should go." "Stay." He reached out, his hand hovering near her arm, not quite touching. "Please, stay." She didn't have the strength to refuse. He guided her inside, settled her into a chair by the fire that still burned low in his hearth. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pressed a cup of water into her shaking hands. Then he sat on the floor at her feet, looking up at her with an expression of such genuine concern that it made her chest ache. "Tell me," he said simply. "It was just a nightmare." "Neve." His voice was gentle but firm. "Tell me." So she did. She told him about the dream, the chanting, the cold faces, his rejection. She told him about all the other nightmares, the ones she'd had since she was 7 years old. Dreams of death, dreams of isolation, dreams where everyone she dared to care about turned away from her in disgust. And then, without meaning to, she told him the thing she had never told anyone. "Sometimes I wish I would have a vision of my own death," she whispered. "Just so I would know when it ends. Just so I would have something to look forward to." Lysander went very still. "Neve dash dash. I know how that sounds. I know it's—" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not going to do anything. I wouldn't. But sometimes the loneliness is so heavy that I can't breathe. And I think maybe it would be easier if I just wasn't here anymore. Look at me." She couldn't bear to see the horror on his face, the realization that she was even more broken than he'd thought. But gentle fingers touched her chin, tilting her head up. His eyes weren't horrified. They were fierce, burning with something that looked almost like anger, but not at her, for her. "You are not a curse," he said, each word deliberate and certain. "You are not a monster. You are a woman who has been abandoned and blamed and left to carry impossible burdens alone. And the fact that you have survived, the fact that you are sitting here, still breathing, still trying, is nothing short of miraculous." "I don't feel miraculous. I feel broken." "You're not broken." He rose onto his knees, bringing himself level with her, his hands framing her face. "You are wounded. There's a difference. Wounds heal, Neve. And I swear to you—" His voice cracked slightly. "I swear that I will spend every day of my life helping you heal, if you'll let me." "Why?" The question came out ragged, desperate. "Why do you care so much? I'm nothing. You are everything." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. "My wolf knew it the moment you walked into my hall," he continued, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "My heart knew it the first time you smiled at me in the garden. And my soul knows it now, looking at you, seeing all your pain and all your strength, and wanting nothing more than to spend eternity proving to you that you are worthy of love. Lysander, I love you." The confession fell from his lips like a prayer. "I know it's too soon. I know you're not ready to hear it. But I need you to know, Neve. I need you to understand that when I look at you, I don't see a curse. I see my future. I see my mate." I see the other half of my soul, and I will not let you disappear into the darkness." She stared at him, her heart breaking and mending all at once. "I don't know how to be loved," she whispered. "I don't know how to believe that this is real." "Then let me teach you." He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her lips. "Let me show you every day until you can't doubt it anymore. Let me prove that someone can lean in instead of pulling away." "What if I can't? What if I'm too damaged to—" "You're not." His hands slid into her hair, cradling her head like she was something precious. "You're not damaged, Neve. You're extraordinary. And if it takes the rest of my life to make you believe that, I will consider it a life well spent." She didn't know who closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question rather than an answer. But when she didn't pull away, when her hands fisted in his shirt and pulled him closer, it deepened into something more, something desperate and healing and achingly tender. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lysander pressed his lips to her forehead, her cheeks, the corners of her eyes where tears still glistened. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. "Not like that. Just stay. Let me hold you. Let me prove that you don't have to be alone anymore." She should say no, should protect herself, maintain the walls that had kept her alive for so long. Instead, she said, "Yes." He carried her to his bed and held her close, his arms a fortress around her, his heartbeat steady against her ear. And as the fire burned low and sleep finally claimed her, Neve realized something that terrified her more than any vision ever had. She was falling in love with him, and for the first time in her life, falling didn't feel like dying. It felt like being born. 1 month of happiness. 1 month of learning what it meant to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. Neve had begun to believe the nightmare was finally over. She was wrong. The vision came without warning, slamming into her mind while she walked in the garden with Lysander. One moment she was laughing at something he'd said. The next, she was on her knees in the snow, gasping, her eyes seeing something that hadn't happened yet. Blood. So much blood. Lysander on the ground, a blade buried in his chest. And standing over him, smiling with triumph, was Alpha Rendell, her old Alpha. The man who had sent her away like unwanted garbage. Neve. Lysander's hands gripped her shoulders, his voice sharp with fear. "Neve, what's happening? What do you see?" She couldn't answer. The vision held her in its grip, forcing her to watch as the life drained from Lysander's eyes, as his hand reached for her and fell short, as everything she had started to love was ripped away. When it finally released her, she was sobbing. "Tell me." Lysander pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Whatever it is, tell me." "You die." The words came out broken, barely audible. "I saw you die. Rendell, my old Alpha. He kills you." Lysander went rigid. "When?" "I don't know. The visions don't always show me when. But it's soon. I can feel it." She pulled back, staring up at him with wild eyes. I have to leave. If I'm not here, if he can't use me as an excuse to come for you." "No." "Lysander, you don't understand. My visions always come true. Always. If I stay, you die. Then we'll change the future." His voice was fierce, certain. "You've never had anyone willing to fight beside you before. You've never had someone who knew the vision was coming. We can prepare. We can protect ourselves." "You can't fight fate." Watch me. Before she could argue further, a horn sounded from the castle walls. They both turned to see a column of riders approaching across the snowy plain, banners snapping in the wind. The banner of the Eastern Pack. Rendel's banner. He's here, Neve whispered. He's already here. The confrontation took place in the Great Hall. Alpha Rendel stood before the throne, flanked by a dozen of his warriors. He was a big man, thick-necked and heavy-browed, with small eyes that glittered with cunning. Neve had spent 19 years flinching from those eyes. She stood beside Lysander now, her hand in his, refusing to flinch any more. "King Lysander," Rendel said, his tone dripping with false respect. "I've come to collect my property." "Your property?" Lysander's voice was ice. The seer, the death speaker. Rendel's gaze slid to Neve, and she saw the familiar contempt there. But something else, too. Hunger. Greed. "She was sent as tribute, but I've since learned her value. I'm prepared to offer compensation for her return." "She's not for sale." "Everything has a price, Your Majesty." Rendel smiled, showing too many teeth. "I'm prepared to be generous. Gold, soldiers, trade agreements." "You misunderstand." Lysander rose from his throne, and power radiated off him in waves. "Neve is not tribute. She is not property. She is my mate, and she will be my queen. And you will leave my castle before I have you thrown out." The hall went deathly silent. Rendel's face contorted with rage. "Your mate? That curse? That monster? You would bind yourself to something that brings death wherever it goes?" "She doesn't bring death. She sees it." Lysander descended the steps from his throne, placing himself between Neve and her former alpha. "And what she's seen is your death, Rendel. At my hands. Today." "Lysander, no." Neve grabbed his arm. "The vision. I saw him kill you. You saw a possible future, one where I didn't know he was coming." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were calm, certain. "But I do know, because of you, because of your gift." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Your gift isn't a curse, Neve. It's salvation. And today, it's going to save us both." Rendel laughed, harsh and ugly. Pretty words from a king who doesn't understand what he's dealing with. That creature has been nothing but a burden since the day she was born. Her own family was grateful to be rid of her. Her family were fools. Lysander's voice hardened. "And so are you, if you think I'll let you take her." "Then you'll die for her." Rendel drew his sword. His warriors followed suit. "I didn't want it to come to this, but if you won't see reason—" "Lysander." Neve stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Let me go with him. If it saves your life—" "No. I can't watch you die. I can't. You won't." He turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. "Do you trust me?" I dash. "Do you trust me, Neve?" She looked into his forest-dark eyes, eyes that had never once flinched from her, that had leaned in when everyone else pulled away, that saw her as precious instead of cursed. "Yes," she whispered. "I trust you." "Then stay. Choose me. Choose us." He pressed his forehead to hers. "And watch me change the future." He kissed her, fierce and brief and full of promise. And then he turned to face Rendel. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. Rendel lunged, his blade arcing toward Lysander's chest, exactly as the vision had shown. But Lysander was ready. He sidestepped, caught Rendel's wrist, and twisted. The sword clattered to the ground. In one fluid motion, Lysander drew his own blade and pressed it to Rendel's throat. "You made a mistake," Lysander said quietly, "thinking I would be unprepared. You made a worse mistake threatening my mate. And you made the worst mistake of your miserable life coming into my home and calling her a curse." Rendel's warriors surged forward, but the king's guards were faster. Within seconds, every Eastern Pact soldier was disarmed and on their knees. "Please," Rendel gasped, all his bravado evaporating. "Please. I was wrong. I didn't understand." "No, you didn't." Lysander's blade didn't waver. "Neve, come here." She moved to stand beside him, her legs shaking but her spine straight. "This man sent you away to die," Lysander said. "He called you a monster, a curse, a burden. Tell me what you want done with him, and it will be done." Neve looked at Rendel, at the man who had made her life a misery, who had cast her out like garbage, who had come here thinking he could reclaim her like lost property. She thought about how easy it would be to say kill him, how satisfying it would be to watch him die. But that wasn't who she wanted to be. "Let him live," she said. "Send him home in disgrace. Let him spend the rest of his life knowing that the girl he threw away became a queen, and there's nothing he can do about it." Lysander smiled, that rare, radiant smile that was hers alone. "As my queen commands." Rendel was dragged away, his protests echoing through the hall. When the doors closed behind him, Lysander turned to Neve and pulled her into his arms. "You changed it," she breathed. "The vision. You changed the future." "We changed it." He kissed her forehead. "Together. That's how it's going to be from now on. Whatever comes, we face it together." "I love you." The words spilled out before she could stop them, the first time she had said them aloud. "I love you, Lysander. I choose you. I choose us. I choose this life, whatever it brings." His smile was like sunrise after an endless night. "And I choose you," he said. "My mate. My queen. My heart." When he kissed her this time, the whole court was watching. She didn't care. For the first time in her life, Neve wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. The throne room had been transformed into a temple of light. Candles flickered from every surface, thousands of tiny flames that turned the stone walls golden. White flowers cascaded from the pillars, winter roses from the garden where Lysander had first made her laugh. And at the end of the aisle, beneath an arch woven with silver branches and moonflowers, stood the king himself, waiting for her. Neve paused at the entrance, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The gown she wore was simple but exquisite, pale silver silk that whispered against her skin, embroidered with tiny stars that caught the candlelight. A crown of white roses sat atop her dark hair. She had never felt beautiful before. She had spent her whole life trying to be invisible. But when Lysander's eyes found her across the hall, when his face transformed with wonder and love and barely contained joy, she finally understood what it meant to be seen. Not as a curse, not as a monster, as a woman worthy of love. She walked toward him alone. She had no family to give her away, no father to place her hand in her husband's. But she didn't need anyone to deliver her. She was choosing this herself, with every step, with every breath. When she reached the altar, Lysander took her hands in his. His fingers were trembling. "You're shaking," she whispered. "I'm terrified you'll change your mind." His voice was rough with emotion. I'm terrified I'll wake up, and this will all have been a dream. It's not a dream. She squeezed his hands. I'm here. I'm staying. I'm yours. The ceremony was ancient, filled with words of binding and belonging. They exchanged vows that spoke of partnership, of protection, of souls intertwined across lifetimes. When the officiant asked if Neve came to this union of her own free will, her voice rang clear through the silent hall. I do. I choose this. I choose him. And when Lysander spoke his vows, he added words of his own. I vow to always lean in when you speak, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. To listen when others turn away, to see you, all of you, even the parts you've been taught to hide, and love every piece. His voice cracked slightly. I have waited 200 years to find you, Neve. I would wait 200 more. The marking came next. Lysander tilted her head gently, exposing the curve of her neck. His lips brushed her skin, warm and tender. Are you ready? He murmured. I've been ready since you knelt before me and asked me to stay. His bite was sharp and sweet, and the mate bond blazed to life between them. She felt everything he felt. Love so vast, it stole her breath. Joy so intense, it bordered on pain. A fierce, protective devotion that wrapped around her like armor. She marked him in return, claiming him as hers, and felt his emotions flood through her. Wonder, gratitude, the bone-deep relief of finally being complete. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying. My queen, he said. My king, she answered. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Neve barely heard them. She was too busy kissing her husband, her mate, the man who had leaned in to listen when the whole world had pulled away. The feast lasted until dawn. There was music and dancing, wine and laughter, celebration that filled every corner of the castle. Neve sat beside Lysander at the high table, her hand intertwined with his, marveling at how completely her life had changed. 2 months ago, she had been sent away as unwanted tribute, convinced she would spend the rest of her days alone and feared. Now she wore a crown. Near midnight, a messenger arrived with news from the Eastern Territories. Alpha Rendell has been deposed, the messenger announced. His pack revolted when they learned what he had attempted. They've chosen a new Alpha, a woman named Sarah, who was once one of his servants. Neve felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. The man who had cast her out, who had tried to reclaim her like property, had lost everything. There's more, Your Majesties. The messenger hesitated. The new Alpha sent a message specifically for the Queen. She says the Eastern Pack wishes to formally apologize for their treatment of the Death Speaker. They ask permission to send a delegation to pay their respects. Lysander turned to her, one eyebrow raised. What would you like me to tell them? Neve considered. For so long, she had dreamed of the people who had feared and rejected her realizing their mistake. She had imagined their faces when they learned she had become someone important, someone powerful. Now that it was happening, she found she didn't need their apology. Tell them they're welcome to send a delegation, she said finally. But not for me, for themselves. If they need to apologize to ease their conscience, they can do so. But I've already moved on. She looked at Lysander and smiled. I have better things to focus on. He lifted her hand to his lips. That's my queen. 2 years later, Neve stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun rise over a kingdom at peace. So much had changed. Her gift, once feared and reviled, had become celebrated. She used her visions to protect the kingdom, warning of threats before they arrived, preventing deaths that would have otherwise been unavoidable. The people who had once called her a curse now called her a blessing. And in her arms, nestled against her chest, was a miracle she had never dared to imagine. Her daughter, 3 months old, with her father's dark hair and her mother's grey eyes. A perfect, precious life that Neve had been terrified she would never be allowed to have. Lysander appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around them both. "You're supposed to be sleeping." "I wanted to watch the sunrise." She leaned back into his warmth. "I spent so many years dreading each new day. Now I can't wait to see what they bring." "And what does today bring?" "Breakfast with my husband." She tilted her head to smile at him. "A walk in the gardens. Perhaps a nap when this one finally stops being so demanding." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "An ordinary, beautiful day." "That doesn't sound very exciting for a queen." "I've had enough excitement for several lifetimes." She turned in his arms, careful not to wake the baby. "I'll take ordinary. I'll take peaceful. I'll take every quiet moment I can get with you." "I love you." He said it like he always did, simply, fiercely, with no room for doubt. "I love you, Neve. I loved you from the moment I leaned in to hear your voice. I'll love you until there's no breath left in my body. And I love you." She rose on her toes to kiss him softly. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for proving that my voice was worth hearing after all." "It was always worth hearing." He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "The world was just too loud to notice. I'm glad I was quiet enough to listen." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, wrapped in each other, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. A seer who had been taught to fear her gift, now using it to protect an entire kingdom. A king who had been wise enough to lean in when everyone else pulled away. The girl everyone feared had finally found her voice. And the king who loved her would spend eternity making sure it was heard. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more Lycan King romances. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and let us know in the comments, what tropes do you want to see next?